and people have left and people have moved on and people have changed and gone different places, that we just do a round of introductions, because some of us are new to, I think almost all of us are new talking to the securities people in terms of rulemaking. So kind of what our agenda is to start with introductions and then move into what the rule is, what happened during the 2020 amendment, what the rulemaking does, the fiscal impact on small businesses, the racial equity impact. And you see me talking a lot, but that's just as in terms of facilitating the conversation. I really want to hear from other people as part of the RAC as to what you think about the ideas, or if you have any concerns, or you think there's anything that the committee and the division and TK in particular needs to consider in terms of whatever it is that you may want to add to the process. I was reading a message at the moment. So, and I forgive you because I am not a great multitasker. So when things pop up, I look, I'm going, oh, okay, I got it. So I'm going to start. My name is Lauren Winters. I'm a senior policy advisor with the division. I've been with the division since 2010. My portfolio has included in the past securities, has always included depository institutions and financial marketplace regulations and things related to all things money, non-depositories as well. I am licensed to practice in Oregon and Washington. Before joining the division, I was a law professor at Gonzaga University School of Law, and I also worked for 2 large regional law firms doing financial as a creditor's rights attorney and a little bit of employment law and some securities work. Because those firms, as you know, have changed over the years, I think that Cody may only be the only lawyer with the same existing firm in its original space. I was at Foster Pepper and Shuffleman, and I was at Garvey, Schubert, and Bear in their original forms in their Portland offices, even though they were headquartered out of Seattle. So that's me. I'm going to hand it off to Karen, and then we can do all the DFR people, and then we'll go through all the other people.
All right. Good morning. My name is Karen Winkle, and I'm the rules coordinator for the division. I've been with the division since 2014, and I am recording this Rulemaking Advisory Committee. That's it.
I guess, Nicole, you can go next. She's our newest hire. We are very excited to have her. She joins us from Stoll Reeves, and so giving a little bit of your background would be helpful.
Yeah, of course. So hi, I'm Nicole. I've been with the division for about 2 weeks now. So I'm definitely still in the integration phase, but securities will be one of my primary responsibilities going forward. So it's a great opportunity to kind of get to see everything in action. Before joining the division, I was at Stoll Reeves. Hi, Jacob. We were colleagues. Don't worry, we're still on great terms. But yeah, I'm excited to kind of see the process and get to know everybody.
Let's hand it off to, I think Cassie's on the line.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cassie Susi. I'm a senior policy advisor with the division and also the rulemaking lead for the division. My portfolio of kind of subject matter is mostly in the insurance space, both in the property and casualty and health sides of the shop. But I get to listen in on rulemaking hearings and learning about securities things as well.
So now I'm going to, Greg is on by phone. So if you want to give an introduction, that would be great. I think he's on by phone.
Craig. So this is Craig Smith with Von Borst Associates. And I'm a financial planner. Been in the business since 2007 and particularly interested in the CKA component.
All right, and now Cody.
Hi, I'm Cody Byrne. I'm a lawyer at Stolburn in Portland. Much of my practice is on behalf of investors with securities and other claims. I also do class action work and other business litigation. Nice to see everybody.
All right, Jake, that leaves your next step on the list.
Sorry, did you mean me? I wasn't sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I'm Jacob Goldberg. I'm a lawyer at Stoll Reeves in Portland, and I do general commercial litigation and often represent companies and securities disputes in Oregon.
And that now takes us to Jessica.
Hi, I'm Jessica Morgan. I'm a lawyer at a Tonkin Torp in Portland. I do business, corporate securities matters, a lot of investment fund and investment advisor work.
And then I guess that's the last person is Stanton. They don't put us in alphabetical order. I don't know why. You're on mute.
Sorry, I thought I'd gotten past that during these past few years, but apparently not. Stanton Gallegos. I am a litigator at Markowitz Herbold here in Portland, and both here and then previously at a firm in New York. A significant part of my practice has been litigating securities issues or securities related issues, both kind of under the securities laws and then also under the fiduciary duty, suitability, the various other ways that comes up. So that's my background.
So I thank you guys for all being here. I know that, it's sunny outside. I'm going to try and get us through and out as quickly as possible. So, what you should know is that I'm going to combine two things at one time. So, as some of you may know, in 2020, the division amended OAR 441350020 to add subsection C, which allowed for an examination waiver under 441-175-01-206B. I say all of that to say none of it really said anything. It just kept some existing designations and then allowed people who had those special designations to ask for a waiver from examination. So right now, the way the rules stand after 2020 is we don't have any specific designations related to faith-based investment goals and strategies or any special designation for the certified kingdom advisors as recognized by FINRA. So what we have is just a list of general designations. And if you may recall, it would be kind of in the old days, sets and subsets. We have a superset that encompasses a bunch of subset and doesn't have a specific subset included. And so what the division is considering is whether we want to put in a special designation for CKA as part of the list of other designations that would be included in the rule. So just as a background for our statutory authority to do so, under OSR 59.285, everyone probably knows that the division has authority to take whatever steps are necessary to amend its rules in order to protect investors and also to make sure that they are consistent with the purposes of the Oregon Securities Law and ORS Chapter 59. Currently, the rules implement ORS 59.135 subsection 3, which makes it unlawful for any person to engage in any act, practice, or course of business which operates or would operate as a fraud or deceit upon any person. When you look at the rule, it actually implements ORS 59.135 by saying you're prohibited from doing these things and it will be a violation If you lie about your designation, you misrepresent that designation, or you cause harm to investors. So that's where the rule stands today. So it gives the prohibition first, and then it gives the exceptions. So as mentioned in the RAC invitation, I want to give a little background on faith-based investing. Not a new concept. Most people recognize that it's been around for a very long time. You have more than 100 years ago, the Methodist Church, the United Methodist Church, not only then continues to do so to screen investments in companies that manufacture alcohol, tobacco, companies that promoted gambling or were involved in the slave trade. And around the same time, you had Quakers getting involved in the investment space. They were looking at, securities issues that involve peace, simplicity, integrity, justice. They helped steer the Friends Fiduciary Corporation into established guidelines that avoided investing contrary to Quaker values and missions. In the late 1960s, you had Roman Catholics, along with other Protestants and other denominations, who were opposed to companies investing in South Africa because their policies on apartheid. So they, after pooling their resources, the religious sisters filed shareholder resolutions to confront corporations that had not adopted the Sullivan principles, which detail that all employees should be treated equally regardless of race. So faith-based investing is not a new concept. So nothing in the rule is going outside on the edge of something that has never been done before. And I'm also going to put in a plug for a book if no one's read it. David List's The Conspiracy of Paper is just one of the best novels about the securities industry and its inception in London. So other than that, what we're looking at right now is how we would amend this rule. It would just simply include a new provision recognizing faith-based investment goals and strategies. And then we would amend 120 to actually include that CKA designation. And I wanted people to understand that it's a designation that comes with other requirements. So the fact that you're a CKA designation means you have to kind of satisfy all of the other designations that are incorporated already in the rules. So it would just put CKA as one of the specifics. And you can, and as Art is out there all the time talking about, you can go on to FINRA and on their investor tools, you can look up any designation and see if they are specifically designated. And CKA comes up in one of those tool searches. Additionally, CKA candidates have to have to sign a statement of faith. They have to do all of these other requirements. And most important to us is that they have to have a continuing education investment requirement. And so that designation would just be folded into all of the other designations. So are there any questions about what the rule is going to try to do?
I was curious about, so I understand why you would amend 441750120, but why would you amend the other subsection if the folks already have, they've passed the other exams where they've already get the waiver?
So one of the things that has come up in the past is we've received a lot of inquiries from CKA advisors saying, well, do I have to be in that superset? And so rather than having to give the waiver expressly every time, we would like to have it be a self-executing waiver so that the only time we would have to get involved in that CKA designation is if we get a complaint about fraud or misconduct in the marketplace. So this now just makes it a self-executing waiver without us having to go through the steps of entering an order every time to give them that waiver. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's helpful background. So you were already giving these waivers constantly, so just makes your life easier.
Yes, it makes our life much easier. Our director asked us to make his life much easier because he has to sign all the waivers along with TK. So by making it a self-executing waiver, we only are getting involved when there is an actual complaint or something. We aren't losing anything. We're just alleviating the administrative requirement of having to do it every single time, which actually brings us to the specific functions of the RAC committee, which is under the Oregon Administrative Procedures Act. What we have our RACs to do and what we are required to do is determine what's going to be the fiscal impact on small businesses. And the statute defines small businesses as 50 or fewer employees. And so when I put together that statement of financial need and impact, the thing that I have to be able to say is I asked the RAC to consider the following: an estimate of the number of small businesses that would be subject to the proposed rule or any changes to the rule, the businesses, a description of any projected reporting, record keeping, or other administrative activities that would impact those small businesses. And I have to identify equipment costs and labor, including cost of professional services on this business. And of course, the manner in which we involved small businesses in the development of the proposed rule. And what I tried to do is, on this advisory committee, get a cross section of people who either are small businesses or work with small businesses so that we have a complete industry representation to answer subsection E. So going through, and it might be hard to say if we can figure out what the estimate of the number of small businesses would be, because that we have a statement that we use when we cannot determine it. So I don't really expect anyone to know the answer to that unless you really do know the answer to that. So I would like to know if anyone has an estimate of the number of small businesses that would be affected by the amendments. Okay, taking silence as we're going to leave it to the division to figure that out. What's your sense that once we determine that there are a significant number of small firms that may be affected, do you think that the proposed changes would have any increased reporting, record keeping, or administrative activities that would affect those businesses? Moving on with silence, how about equipment costs and labors or professional services? Okay, now going once, going twice, going 3 times, your next job. Racial equity impact, if any. And this is a new requirement that got passed out of the legislature in 2022, maybe 2021. Whenever an agency is going to adopt or amend a rule, the agency now has to consider how it will affect racial equity in the state. And I want people to really focus on the fact that the statutory language is racial equity and not underrepresented communities. So, and I know you're going to say, well, how'd you get there if it's not defined in the statute? Because under Oregon law, we're required to give words their ordinary meaning unless they are terms of art. Racial is not gender. Racial is not anything other than racial equity, which means treating people of all races fairly, justly, and without bias. And so one of the things that the division has to consider is how the proposed rule or amendment will affect the fair, just, and unbiased treatment of people of all races. And while we may have some ideas about how that might work, we would really like to hear from anybody on the committee if they have any thoughts on this topic.
Well, the one thing I noted, so the certified kingdom advisor to specifically Christian representation or designation. I wonder whether, you know, the division would consider if there were other denominations, you know, that had similar designations, whether they would go through a similar process, and whether there would be, you know, racial impacts that might be different based off of, you know, different denominations that might provide this kind of certification.
You know, one of the things in terms of thinking about it, well, in terms of me thinking about it, is that how many other denominations or other religious groups would be wanting to include the designation? And to date, when I went back and looked through the records, the only people who are requesting that specific waiver are members of CKA, all of the, you know, those types of investment advisors. Nobody is promoting a particular investment advisor based on a particular designation. So in terms of what I was wondering is in terms of those members of, you know, African Americans or other racial groups that are looking for a particular type of investment advisor, they're going to, of course, probably migrate toward CKA. For example, if you were a United Methodist, you might look for a CKA advisor. If you were Jewish, you're probably not going to look for a CKA advisor. We aren't, you know, picking and choosing, but if that is important to an investor, it makes it easier for that investor to find someone who is in their space, right? And that could be a good or bad thing. I'm not, you know, but if that's important to an investor, then the fact that you can go on to FINRA and find a CK advisor doesn't seem to me to have a negative or impact on those racial groups that are particularly religious. So how could we take steps to mitigate any harm? I think that the way we've taken the steps to mitigate the harm is already built into the system, right? You can look at a designation and decide, I want to go with that investor because they have that particular designation. On the other hand, the division has managed to protect itself, protect investors by saying, if you put that designation on and you are not a CKA advisor, you're going to get in trouble in terms of, oh, I'm a particular religious type of advisor, but I haven't done any of the CKA certifications. So we've protected, so the system automatically protects those individuals who are looking for that type of advisor, because if they didn't meet that CKA designation, then they would fall back into, you've committed fraud or deceit or a misrepresentation on investors in the marketplace. So in some ways, the system, because of how you look for your investment advisor, protects people who are seeking a particular type of investment advisor based on what I would call a pretty broad statement of what are Christian values, right? So I'm, you know, anybody else have any other thoughts? And I have to say that's more thinking out loud, based on racial equity and impact, if any, because it's a new category for us to consider. And so I'm interested on any thoughts anyone else has on the topic.
In response to the idea of other faiths, the idea of where the CKA fell apart in the approval process, as I understand it, as a CKA holder that can't use it in the state of Oregon currently, is with respect to, where am I? Rule 441, 135, 0020, and subsection what?
Now you want me to go back?
To-
That would be
yeah.
helpful.
So in subsection 2, it lists the American National Standards Institute, the National Commission for Certifying Agencies, and then an organization that is on the United States Department of Education's list as being eligible. So if you don't want to get into, how would you put it, the designation soup in approvals in the future, would you not address it from that point as opposed to adding on the CKA?
I don't know. I'd have to think about that. I guess the question is there any, here's a different way for me to kind of come at this question. Is there any potential harm in having that CKA designation? Is there somehow, would that, my understanding, and when I looked at it and put in CKA and investment advisors, all these different investment advisors came up. And they basically focused on the fact that they wanted to help individuals who wanted to make investments that were consistent with their religious beliefs and moral values. So if that's who you want to choose, then shouldn't an investor have the right to choose that person if it's an approved designation that you can get through FINRA? I mean, isn't that, in addition, in this world, and we, in the internet world, you can see that investment advisor. You have a way to check with a division to see if that particular investment advisor is subject to disciplinary action. So if I'm an investor and that's important to me, haven't I just made it easier to find that investment advisor who is consistent with what I want to do with regards to my investment strategies and goals? For example, I could, just as I was saying, I could go to Morgan Stanley. They have a whole department and a whole process in place where they're doing faith-based investment strategies and direct you to those investment advisors that are part of the Morgan Stanley network. So I was trying to figure out, is there any harm as it would relate to somehow doing it the other way? Would it in somehow unfairly or unjustly treat people of color? And you don't have to, like, I mean, it's kind of an interesting question when you think about it. So feel free to write to me. We've got time. Feel free to write to me and think about it, about, how would that work? How, is there any concern with regard to the racial equity impact? And we're going to send the slides to you afterwards so that you can see it, but what would be the potential equity impact of CKA on a person of color who is investing? Which is why my next slide is a question mark. Which is, you can, we've got time, we're going to talk about our next steps. We have time to, we're going to go through one more round of internal vetting of this concept and this idea. But right now, as it stands, we think that from the agency's standpoint, it eliminates an administrative step that we don't need to take because it would be self-executing. We have our protections both statutorily and in the rule to protect any investor that was harmed by somebody making misleading or misrepresentations or causing financial harm to someone if they were to misuse the designation. And we do not see it, although there are a number, we don't see that it's going to have any, increased record keeping because you'd have to do that anyway. It's not going to increase your bookkeeping because you have to do that anyway. And you would still be, if we had to come and investigate you, we still would be able to do that. You would still need the documentary evidence to show that you've complied with the statutory requirements and the regulatory requirements. But racial equity is an interesting question, right? What will it mean for investors of color that there is suddenly an ability that there is a CKA designation and those investors of color, as educated by ARP, who may be senior or not, can actually access a FINRA tool and find a CKA investment advisor?
So I guess my question is not necessarily like related to investors, but does this affect other advisors in the state? And how they manage their practices, or if it's going to have an effect on investors that contact advisors based on that designation solely, and it's taking work away from other advisors, or that racial decisions may not be an issue now because we don't have the designation, but in the future, if we do, then it might point out something about people that have the designation. I mean, I don't know.
I know it's kind of one of those things where you're like, okay, now I have to think about it in terms of something broader. But one of the things that I was thinking, what steps, not to necessarily mitigate just the racial equity question, but one of the things that I may recommend and suggest is that the division put together the AARP type bulletin, which says what do designations mean, what should you look for, and where can you go to find out if somebody is how to use that FINRA tool, kind of like we do with mortgage loan originators, and put that up on our website so people who have questions about designations generally have the information to know what all of these designations mean. Because my guess is that in the world of investing, especially with particular unsophisticated investors, they have no idea what a designation means. And
But don't they have to include that anyway on the Form 80B Part 2Bs? Like they have to put what it means to have the certain designation. But again, they're only getting it if they look into what that person is, or if they get the 2B from the advisor directly. So you may not. I mean, I definitely think it's probably a good idea to have it on your website. But I do think that at the point of investing with an advisor, they are being presented with what the designations are, or at least they should be.
Well, I think they are, but I deal with consumers every single day. I also deal with licensees every single day. And the fact that things are disclosed does not mean that people understand what they're reading.
No.
It's that age-old deposition question. I know what it says, but did you understand what it meant? So, it's just it's an extra step that I think is not an unreasonable step in terms of the division carrying out its fiduciary duties to protect investors in the marketplace. Yes, they get the information. But I bet you I could, like, if I grabbed all unsophisticated investors in Oregon in a room and said, raise your hand if you know what the designation means, there would be crickets.
Yeah.
And I think it's important also to put that information out there to really, to say to people, hey, you have the ability to check that out, and you shouldn't be fooled by any designation. There are specific designations, and there are reasons they're being disclosed to you as an investor.
Well, yeah, and it would help the investors look for someone that could maybe be a little bit more pinpointed into what type of investing they want to do, not just generally, oh, you're an investment advisor, but hey, I actually have these values, and this is what you should be looking for in an advisor.
Right. And for those investors who don't care, how does it hurt?
No, yeah, the only thing I was thinking is that if it's a predominant, if the CKA advisors are predominantly one race, then does that point out to potential investors a racial discrimination option?
Well, I was thinking about that too, but how about the flip side of that? Would it encourage more diversity among CKA advisors?
Yeah, I don't know.
One question I had kind of along the same lines when I think about the advisors themselves is, and maybe there aren't, I just don't know offhand, but are there other certifications for other religious groups that perhaps advisors in Oregon won't have the opportunity to take advantage of? My mind immediately goes, is there like an Islamic, financial designation that's recognized? I don't know if there is, but that's one of the questions. And that's not to say that it would be necessarily bad to approve the certified kingdom advisor. It's just, would there be some impact there that we're not thinking through?
That's why I'm giving you guys time to think it through. I honestly do not have any of the answers to those questions. And until I looked at it and really started thinking about it, then I started thinking about it, because I can tell you for most of the rules, right, that we do, there is little racial equity impact in licensing a mortgage loan originator, in coming up with rules that affect consumer finance lending, licensees, who's going to be a lender in the marketplace. But here you have somebody who is actually interacting with, and I want to make sure that we're talking about every day. I've got maybe a little bit of money. I'm going to invest. I'm going to engage in the services. I need I need investment advice. I need a financial planner. What is the impact to a community of color? And somehow does that mean that, okay, put it a different way. There was a move afoot a few years ago for the Oregon State Bar and its referral service that they would identify if somebody called in and said, I want a Black attorney, that that the Oregon State Bar would, have a list of Black attorneys that were part of that program. And could, if somebody who is Black wanted a Black attorney, but the flip side of that was, of course, well, what if somebody white calls in and says, I want a white attorney? The other, that's different than saying, I want an attorney. I'm not a native language speaker. I want an attorney who speaks Spanish or French or a language in which I can converse and explain my situation clearly so that I can understand the advice I'm getting. That's a different issue than saying, based upon, you know, characteristics, immutable characteristics that you can't change, that this is the attorney that you're going to have. I think, and this is what I was thinking about, the same thing is true with the CKA advisor. There is nothing in that CKA designation that would say all CKA advisors are white, or you're only going to get a white advisor. And maybe it gives people of color who are investment advisor representatives, don't know how many there are in the state. And of course, I'm just speaking off the top of my head, and I have no empirical data to support this statement, is maybe suddenly now you've opened up an avenue for people of color who would fall within the CKA designation to be able to expand their business opportunities, because now you have investors of color able to get advice from like-minded investment advisors. Now, I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. But there would be no way to know if you had a CKA designation, whether the advisor is black, white, or otherwise, right? Because you're just a CKA advisor. Just trying to think through all of the issues, not saying there's, good, bad, or otherwise. Just they asked us to consider it. They asked us how we could mitigate it. And we're just, from the 30,000-foot view looking at the issue. Because this is one of those areas where people will be talking to, consumers in the marketplace, not just big retail investors, not just big people. And I don't want to, our division doesn't want to have to go over to the legislature and say, well, we gave them the designation and oh my God, we had 400 complaints.
Can I take it to a different paradigm?
Absolutely.
What difference does it make on the CFP, CFA, chartered financial consultant, whatever existing designation you want? There's no racial component of hiring one of those individuals from the state side. As far as the CKA would go, there would be nothing from the consumer side that's pushing one way or another. It's allowing people choice.
That's kind of where I have come down on the issue, but I'm not, is the designation is neutral. It could be anybody and everybody.
Yeah.
But I do want people to actually think about it, consider it. Reach out to me if you've said, I was thinking about it and I have some other ideas, or, I do think it would be helpful to have those thoughts in writing, since this is a new regulatory questions that we have to respond to. And I have noticed that other agencies throughout the state, that their racial impact statements are very detailed and very particular, and their RACs are considering that those requirements very carefully. So I do not want this RAC to go, well, it's race-based neutral, we can move on with our lives. I think that we need to take some time to actually think about it, think about if there is any, what that world would look like, what steps, if any, we could take to mitigate it if necessary, and what recommendations that you would have based on it. I mean, we could all come down and say it doesn't matter. That's fine. But I think that we have to look like we took some measured steps to reach that conclusion. So, I don't think Karen can tell us when is our public hearing scheduled.
Oh, there we are. I think we would be looking at a May hearing.
I think, and I don't mean to be
Go right ahead.
mean,
Go right
think we
ahead.
better look at a July after legislative session hearing.
Oh, of course. Of
Not
course.
that, not that I want to say that everybody is looking at, oh gee, everybody's life is dictated by the legislative session, but for the division, a lot of our lives are dictated by the legislative session. But the first week available after everyone is, because we have to give notice to legislate to the legislative body, and I think that they would appreciate a little bit of time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I was just going off of an initial effective date.
I would like to have this effective by September 30. So could
That
we
sounds
have,
good. That gives us
so
time.
could we have a hearing in July?
Yeah.
And that will allow for the internal review in a
Mhm.
very busy time frame when we have a lot of bills up.
Right.
So we'll get that to you. So
Yeah.
if we aren't going to have a legislative, a hearing until July, I'm going to give you guys, believe it or not, a lot of time to think about
Yeah.
the racial equity. So let's say that I would like to hear if you have any thoughts, comments, and please, good, bad, otherwise indifferent. Why don't we say that you guys have to have any comments to me by the end of April?
And I can say tentatively, we could be looking at a hearing on July 25.
Okay. So Karen is going to forward the slides we went through today, and then she's also going to include those dates, but I think 30 days is more than adequate time to kind of think about the racial equities. Oh, and fiscal impact, if you have any thoughts on that as well. Think about those things and let us know, and we will fold those into our internal review process as we talk to TK and the deputies, Kirsten and Alex, about amending the rule. So questions or comments about that timeline and those next steps? All right, I see that we are done. I hope everybody has an opportunity to go outside and enjoy today, because I checked the weather and we're having 1 day of spring. one whole day, and then it'll be gray and rainy for the rest of the week. So thank you all for participating. I look forward to receiving your comments, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Waiting for everyone to leave.
There's an external number of 0078.
I believe that's Craig. He's hanging up, so we're all
Okay.
free to leave.
All right. Okay, yeah, just send me the